So good morning again, everyone. The title of our Christmas message this morning is The Day You Were Born. It was my second choice. There was another talk title I really wanted to have because of the other sacred event going on this weekend. Does anyone know what that talk title might be?
Yeah,
The Force Awakens. I wanted to title the message The Force Awakens. But then I thought, that's Star Wars and Christmas have nothing in common, right? One is about humanity waking up to the divine truth within and all around them, and the other is about the birth of Jesus, right? The point being that the birth of Christ is about waking up, humanity waking up to the divine within them and all around them. So as I thought about it further, there's actually a lot in common to the Force Awakens and the Christ Awakens in each of us. There's a famous poem about the Nativity that parts of it go like this. It says, "Once upon a time, a long, long time ago," not in a galaxy far, far away, but begins the story of a baby that most of you should know. Some angels came from heaven, and they began to sing, "To the shepherds in the fields below, glad tidings do we bring. A bright star lit the heavens, the light of the Magi's way, to the baby in the manger who was born on Christmas Day." And of course, this poem is referring to the Christ child, but I want to go a little deeper into the message by saying that that poem is also about you. That it's not just about the day that Christ was born, but about the day that you were born. For I am arguing, or will argue, that on the day you were born, the angels rejoiced in the heavens. And on the day that you were born, anyone who was wise or knew a thing looked at you in awe. That on the day you were born, that something in your mother, when she looked at you, knew that your birth was a miracle, and that nothing had ever happened like it before, and would never happen like it again. And so Christmas is, of course, a day where we celebrate the birth of Christ, but I think it's apt to say as well that it marks our day of spiritual birth. That Christmas is for all of us a spiritual birthday. And that's a good reason to give each other presents. And that's a good reason to make sure that we treat each other with good cheer and an openness of recognizing just how sacred this life is and just what a miracle it was that you were born. Jesus, two of his most important yet briefest parables about the kingdom of heaven come back to back in the Gospels. In one, Jesus says to his disciples that the kingdom of God is like a man who found a treasure buried underground. Upon finding it there, he sold everything he owned and bought that field. This is always a strange parable, because why didn't he just dig up the treasure and take it with him, right? But it speaks to that importance, of course, of the treasure within. That when we really know the magnificence within us, we're willing to let go of any of the material goods around us to live in that. The next parable, Jesus says to his disciples that the kingdom of heaven is like a man who went searching for a pearl of great price. And when he found that pearl, he sold everything he owned and bought it. The spiritual question for us is, what is the pearl? What is that most holy and sacred thing in your life that you would let everything go of in order to ascertain and understand? For many, it's Christ himself. For others, it's self-realization. For me, it's the simple awareness of our own life, our own soul, and our own being. If we could understand that preciousness, the awesomeness inherent in each and every one of us, then we we shall live in awareness of the kingdom and of the Most High. A good friend of mine, he's in the congregation, he shared with me a powerful dream that he had. And in the dream, he walks into a dining room, and there's a long table there. And sitting at the table are all the great spiritual masters. Jesus is there, Buddha is there, Muhammad is there, Lao Tzu is there. I jokingly asked him, is Andy Griffith in a sheriff's outfit there? Is Yoda there? It's a dream. You can add anybody who wants there. Is Dumbledore's there? So the answer, of course, is yes. Mr. Rogers is there. They're all there. And the men, they and the women too, because there's lots of women there as well. They point out an empty seat. And then my friend, when he's telling me this dream, he starts trembling a little bit. There's tears in his eyes because there's an open seat there, and they invite him to sit down. And he says, "Who, me? Who, me? Yes, you," they say. And someone says back to him, "We make room for everybody. We make room for everybody." And I was so honored that my friend shared with me this story, which to him was a spiritual revelation. And it's a reminder that any spiritual teacher who was anybody and is to be remembered never pointed at themselves, never said, "Make a seat for me at your table." But they made a seat for somebody else. They never put themselves first, but are always willing to go second, because their very teaching is that your brother and your sister, all of those around you, are born a miracle. How do we ascertain the pearl of great price? First comes that willingness and that openness to see it. In order to attain it, we must achieve a great humility. But in that humility, we must also accept the miracle of our own life. And I don't mean the kind of self-centeredness that can come with how much material goods we have, or how important we've come to be, or how much money is in our bank account, that kind of self-obsession that really isn't about self-love but self-survival. But I'm talking about that recognition that what is in us is what is in everybody. The force, that divine presence, that when we awaken to it, begins to awaken itself in us, enliven our being. It reminds us that the gift of life isn't, of course, a present at all. It's getting to be a child. It's getting to be a parent. It's getting to be a loved one. It's getting to love someone. It's getting to live in the truth of who we are. There's an old story about a king who's having trouble with his kingdom. So he calls forth the wisest man in the kingdom to help him. And the wise man, upon observing the king, realizes that the king isn't taking care of himself, isn't loving himself at all. And so he says to the king that you are like a river, and your kingdom is like the creeks that come out of that. If you are murky, unkept, and uncared for, so shall your kingdom be. The king doesn't get this, and he invites him to explain. And the wise man has to think for a while, and he says, if you were in the middle of the desert and dying of thirst, and someone were to offer you a drink of water, but in return they wanted half your kingdom, would you give it to them? The man thought about it, and he said, yes. He said, the wise man, now let's say that water had poison in it, and you were going to die. And yet another man appeared, and he said, I have the elixir to that poison, but what I want in return is the other half of your kingdom. Would you give it to him? Yes, the king answered the wise man. Why is it, the king says, that you value your kingdom so much, which is only worth a glass of water, and not your own being, not your own self? It's a reminder that as many blessings, as many material blessings that we have in our life, that if we don't value the river, if we don't value the source of our own being, things get muddled, things get murky, and we forget and neglect the truth of who we are, the Christ child within each and every one of us. Now, when we say that God is within, we don't mean back here in the solar plexus somewhere, right? Is that where the solar, what the hell is a solar plexus? Thank you. They don't teach us biology in this area. The hip bone's connected, that's about as far. We don't mean that it's in there somewhere, although I like the idea of a ball of light in all of us. But what we mean when we say within is that there is a spiritual reality that is both in and yet transcends the physical one. And that the divine reality in you is the divine reality in me, is the divine reality in all of life. And yet it is up to our own awareness that virgin birth through each one of us that brings forth knowledge of the Christ wisdom and the Christ truth. Ernest Holmes, in our book of the month, A New Design for Living, says, "When we say that the only God we will ever know, we will discover within ourselves, we do not mean that such a God is a figment and creation of our own imagination, but rather that there is an indwelling God manifest through our own personal and individual relationship to the infinite. In no way does this minimize God. Rather, it magnifies him. God is not lost, and neither are we lost or separated from God. The more completely we are able to see God in everything, the more completely will the one God in all things respond to us." It's going to be Christmas, and many of us have been there before. And perhaps it's not a day where you celebrate the birth of Christ. And perhaps it's not a day where you want to celebrate it as the birth of your own being. But perhaps we can consider that it's a great day to call our human birthday. That Christmas is a day to celebrate the birth of humanity. That it is a day to celebrate what is most sacred and what is most capable of man and womankind together. That it is a day to celebrate that in this vast cosmos, for some reason, we exist where we are. And what other alternative do we have than to seek to live fully in awareness of whatever that divine power is that expresses us and brings us here. This idea of the human birthday is what every great articulator of the Christmas season, every myth maker, including George Lucas, has understood. Charles Dickens understood this in writing his Christmas Carol by telling us the story of a man who is so caught up in the materialism of life that he forgets to nurture his own spirit. But he wakes up, he remembers, and Scrooge says, "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach." Do not shut out the lessons, the spirit of your past and the spirit of your future and the spirit of your present have to share with you. Frank Capra understood this when he made It's a Wonderful Life. He understood the importance of the human birth. That's why he turned a story about what it would be like for a man to see what would happen if he had never been born into a Christmas movie. For George Bailey to do that, there's a great, you have to watch the movie at least 15 times, I think, to see it. And George Bailey's dad's bank office, there's a little sign on the wall. We all who love the movie know, no man is a failure without friends. But there's another great quote there. It's on the wall, and it's by an old Christian mystic named St. Lawrence, who also talked about practicing the presence of God. But it says, "All that you can take with you is what you've given away." All that you can take with you is what you've given away. This statement to me leads right back to that parable. Those parables Jesus taught, which again, he didn't say the kingdom of God was the treasure. He didn't say it's the pearl. He uses the whole analogy to recognize that in order to truly understand what is most divine and sacred, we have to be willing to release and let go of all of it. Hopefully, with the realization that when we let go, it's all right there. It all comes back to us. Frank Capra later in his life would say, "Someone should keep reminding Mr. Average Man that he was born free, divine, strong, uncrushable by fate, society, or hell itself, and that he is a child of God, equal heir to all the bounties of God, and that goodness is riches, kindness is power, and freedom is glory. Above all, every man is born with an inner capacity to take him as far as his imagination can dream or envision, providing he is free to dream and envision. We are precious beings. Life is a precious thing. I love Star Wars because it asks us two real essential questions in life. One, does the Force exist? Is it real? And the second, which is a fun one, is there life on other planets, right? Sorry to turn this into an alien discussion. Whether it be in the far distant past or the far distant future, is there life on other planets of being? It sounds like a call from outer space right there. So yeah, it says there. How many people, let's show of hands, we won't hold you to, how many people is there life on other planets? Whoa. You'd think we were in a New Age hippie church or something. So I don't know for sure the answer to that question, but I do know when I have a big life question, I don't know the answer, the best way to go about it is to ask a child. If you ask someone that's under the age of 10, they can always answer the question because they haven't learned yet that they're not supposed to know what the answer is, right? So I had a great time talking with Gavin about the topic of aliens, and I said, Gavin, do you believe that there's life on other planets? And he said, yes, absolutely. However, he had just finished watching Alien Autopsy on Netflix, which is kind of a funky thing about Area 51 and all that kind of stuff, so I think his vision was a little clouded. But he asked me if I believe that there were aliens, and I said, I don't know for sure that there's aliens on other planets, but what I am quite sure of is that there's beings foreign to who we are that are all around us, and simply our senses don't allow us to see them or hear them. This scared the hell out of Gavin, and he asked if we could change the subject. The point that I want to get to is it's really important to ask a question like, is there life on other planets? Because if there is, what it tells and affirms for us is that life is infinite and expressing itself in multiple ways all over the galaxies. If there isn't, there's still an important spiritual truth there, because it says for the whole damn thing, the whole cosmos, we are the only humans expressing an awareness of this thing called consciousness in our tiny little neck of the woods on planet Earth. How precious, how important, how sacred. The author Marilyn Robinson said in a recent book of her essays my mom gave me for my birthday, thank you Mom, she said, we cannot know that conscious life has appeared only on Earth, but we have good ground for assuming that it is rare and extraordinary enough that its vanishing would be an incalculable impoverishment of the sum of things. If we say that, for all we know to the contrary, there is just one minor planet in a limitless field of stars where apple trees blossom and where songs are sung, then most of us would probably grant an important centrality to that planet. The parable of the pearl of great price is not apt here, since it assumes something imaginable, a near equivalence of exchange value between the whole of a man's wealth and a single pearl. But if this strange planet is the pearl, what could even seem to be of equivalent value? Never underestimate the value of being alive, of being who you are, of this very moment. When I was young, I remember Christmas by the presents that I received. As I got a little older, I remembered my Christmas by those who gave me the presents that I received. As I grew yet older, I remember Christmas by the people I got to give presents to. And as I grow even older, I hope that I remember Christmas by my ability to understand what a gift life is. We don't know where it came from. We don't know where it's going, but it can be enough in this moment to simply know that it is, and to understand in our heart of hearts that our response to that knowledge that there is something of value inside of each of us, to live from that is to bring forth perhaps the greatest knowing and the greatest understanding, the greatest truth that we recognize as the birth of Christ on Christmas Day. To close with a final thought from Ernest Holmes from A New Design for Living, the continuing challenge is to increase our knowledge of the infinite potential which lies ahead of us, and every increase but reveals the more that is to be known. To realize that an infinite artist, the divine creator, the cosmic reality is back of and in and through all of our acts, is to realize the truth which enables us to enter with joy and enthusiasm into the day in which we live. Each day is a new creation, a new moment for a fuller awareness of spiritual reality, and a time for designing the new life we want to live. So thank you for your time, everyone, this morning. Merry Christmas.